This is OC from Digital Adventures. Got another great project for you here today. So essentially what we have is four different sprites. We have a spaceship, we have the planet Mars, we have a lander, and we have explosion. So let me click on full screen and show you how this works. So we click on the green flag, we press our spacebar key, and that basically goes toward the planet Mars. As we're going toward the planet Mars, it gets closer and closer and the planet gets bigger and bigger. What we're trying to do is get our distance traveled to equal 1,000 so that we can land on the planet. If we get there too early or we hit the sides, we explode. So if we hit any edge, and we have gravity constantly pulling us back down. And so I'm not going to go through this fully to get us there. There's another video on the channel that'll show you how we fully arrive at the planet. But let's stop this and let's go ahead and build this. So we're going to start off with the spaceship. What we're going to do is we're going to get rid of these existing blocks of code and we're going to go ahead and build. So let's get rid of these. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start off with a when green flag clicked. So we're going to go into events. We're going to get ourselves a when green flag clicked. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into motion and we're going to set our X and our Y position. So these default to where the spaceship currently is, but we want to start it off at the bottom there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start it off at 0, 0, so that it's right at the center of the screen when the game first starts. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a acceleration variable. So we're going to make this all caps so that we can tell that this is our new variable that we created. And we're gonna uncheck this old one here. We're gonna uncheck this one as well. So we're gonna put acceleration up here. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to set that starting acceleration to equal 0. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make a couple of character controls. So we're gonna get a when green flag clicked. We're gonna get another when green flag. And then we're gonna go into control. We're gonna grab ourselves 2 forever loops. And inside these forever loops, we're going to put 2 if-then conditional statements. And inside these conditional statements, what we're going to do is we want to sense for whether or not certain key spaces are pressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to get one that's going to go there, and we're going to get another one. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for whether or not that left arrow or that right arrow key is pressed. So that will allow us to navigate that spaceship around. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this to be the turning for this. So what we're going to do for the left arrow is we're going to turn it counterclockwise. And this is going to be 5 degrees, not like a huge motion, but not too small that you can't see it. And then for the right arrow, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it clockwise, and that's going to be by 5 degrees. So essentially what we have it do is we've got our starting position, we've got acceleration set up, and now what we want to do is we want to add a couple different boundary conditions. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we want to start off and figure out how we're going to do some movement here. So let's go into events. We're going to get ourselves another when green flag clicked. We're going to get ourselves a forever loop. And inside this forever loop, we're going to put a couple things. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a move 10 steps. But we actually don't want this to move 10 steps. We want this movement to be based on that acceleration variable that we created. So let's pop that in there. And then another thing that we want to do is we're going to have our change y by and change x by. So let's get a change y by. We're going to put this in here, and we're going to do this change y by a -3. Essentially, that's what's going to always be pulling down on us. And we're also going to grab ourselves a change x by, and that's going to simulate constantly being pulled back. So we're going to have sort of a gravity effect in here, which is going to be really cool. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves an if-then conditional statement. So we're going to go into control, we're going to get an if-then, we're going to put that right in there. And what we want to do is we want to sense whether or not we're touching the edge. Because if we touch the edge, we're basically going to create an explosion. So we're going to grab touching the edge. And then inside of that, what we're going to do is we want to be able to broadcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to broadcast. This is going to be a new message, and we're going to make this be explosion. So we're going to make this new message be explosion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hide. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stop the whole game. So essentially, like if we ever crash into the edge, what it's going to do is it's going to broadcast explosion, and we're going to use that explosion broadcast message a little later in the project. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create another conditional statement. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to events. We're going to get ourselves a when green flag clicked. We're going to get ourselves a forever loop. Inside this forever loop, what we're going to do is we're going to put two if-then conditional statements. We're going to nest these conditional statements. And so we're going to put one here, and then we're going to put the other inside. So for the first part of this, what we want to do is this is going to be our boundary condition for whether or not we're touching the planet Mars. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set an equal condition. And this equal, we're going to set this to 1,000. And that's going to essentially simulate us traveling to Mars. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves another variable. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this distance traveled. So we're going to click OK there, and we're going to pop this right in here. And so we're going to say if the distance traveled, there's going to be something that happens, but we don't just want the distance traveled to be something. What we also want to be able to know is if we're touching the planet Mars. So we're going to pop in touching. We're going to do the drop down to Mars. And if it's both distance traveled equals 1,000 and it's touching Mars, then what we're going to do is we're going to hide our spaceship. And then we're going to broadcast that we've landed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into event. We're going to grab ourselves a broadcast block, and we're going to change this broadcast to a new message, and we're going to say we've landed. And that's going to activate some additional code in there. The final thing that we're going to do is we're going to make another boundary condition to say what happens when all of that is not going on. So we're going to grab ourselves a when green flag clicked. We're going to go into looks. We're going to get ourselves a show block. And then underneath that show block, what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a forever loop. So we're going to go into control, get ourselves a forever loop. And inside this forever loop, what we're going to do is we're going to grab an if then else conditional statement. So we're going to grab this. We're going to put that inside of here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to nest two if thens inside of these this conditional statement. And so we're going to put one right there. We're going to put the second one right there. And so what we want to do is this is going to basically simulate us pushing that space key to keep our spaceship afloat. So what we're going to do is we want to sense whether or not the key space is pressed. And if the key space is pressed, we want to also know what our acceleration variable is clocking in at. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into operators, and we're going to see if our acceleration variable is less than, let's call it 10, then we're going to do something. So we're going to go into variables. We're going to grab that acceleration block, and this is the condition that we're testing for. And if that acceleration is less than 10, what we want to do is we're going to change that acceleration by 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait 0.2 of a second. And then what we're going to do is we're going to switch to the next costume. And so I'm going to grab that next costume here. Let's move this a little higher to make sure that we can see all of that there. And then the next thing that we're going to do is within the else, what we're going to do is we're going to grab another operator. This is also going to be a less than operator. And what we're trying to do is we want to see if our acceleration is 0. So what we're going to do is if 0 is less than that acceleration variable, what we're going to do is we're going to change that acceleration by -1. So we're going to grab this here. We're going to change that acceleration, and we're going to have that be by -1. And then we're going to wait an additional 2 seconds. So in control, 0.2 of a second. And so essentially, this is all the code that we need for our spaceship. So we've got 6 different blocks here. The first block, we set the position and we set our acceleration. Then we've got 2 blocks that sort of turn us left and right. Then what we're doing is we're simulating gravity with this block of code here. And also we're creating that boundary condition to say what happens if we touch an edge. And also then here we create the boundary condition for what happens when we're touching Mars. So let's go into Mars and let's program this here. So we're going to get that out of there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into Mars. And what we're going to do is the first thing that we're going to grab is we're going to grab ourselves a when green flag clicked. And then what we want to do is with that variable, we want to set our distance traveled to 0. So when we first start off the game, we want to make sure that our distance traveled is 0, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build that up to 1,000 by seeing how long we can, stay afloat. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to grab a forever loop. We're going to get ourselves an if-then conditional statement. Inside this conditional statement, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a less than operator. So because the 1,000 number is important to us, what we want to do is we want to be constantly checking, is our distance traveled less than 1,000? If our distance traveled is less than 1,000, what we're going to do is we're going to change that distance traveled by 1, and then we're going to wait 1/10 of a second. So this is going to sort of simulate how we're staying afloat within this game. So we're going to change this to 1/10 of a second. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves another when green flag clicked. We're going to get ourselves a looks block. And what we're going to do is we're going to have this go backward by 1 layer. So we're going to get ourselves a go backward by 1 layer. So we grab this here. Instead of forward, we're going to have it be backward by 1 layer. And then we're going to get ourselves a forever loop. Within that forever loop, what we're going to do is, because we want the planet to increase based on our distance traveled, what we're going to do is we're going to set an operator to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is we go into looks, we're going to get a set size to, and this is going to be a set size to a percentage. So we're going to drop that in there, but instead of it being a fixed percentage, what we want to have it based on is that distance travel variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a multiplier operator. And within that multiplier operator, what we're going to do is we're going to put distance traveled as our first argument. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have that increase by 1.3. And so that's going to give us a pretty long sort of time for this to sort of like travel towards Mars. And Mars is going to get bigger and bigger, as you'll see in the other YouTube video that we have here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to program our lander now. The lander is what's going to happen once we get to that distance traveled equals 1,000. It's going to basically turn the spaceship into a lander. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a when green flag clicked. And then what we're going to do is we're going to initially hide this lander, right? We don't want the lander to show up until it gets a message. And that message is going to be that you've essentially landed. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to when I receive. When I receive that landed message, what I'm going to do is, from a motion standpoint, I'm going to go to the spaceship. And once I go to the spaceship, what I want to do is I want to show up, right? So essentially, it's a very simple 2 blocks of code that basically say, if our distance traveled equals 1,000, then we're going to send a message. Distance traveled equals 1,000, and we're touching Mars. Then our spaceship, it generates a message that says broadcast landed. And so that sends it over here. And when it receives landed, essentially it turns into that lander. The final thing that we're going to want to program is our explosion. So what we're going to do is let's clear this existing code out of here. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab ourselves a when green flag clicked. The next thing that we want to do is we want to hide this, right? Because we don't want this to show up until it receives the right instructions or the right conditions are met. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say that when I receive that message, explosion, what am I going to do? And so what we're going to do is we want to check something. So we want to look into control, and we're going to get ourselves an if-then conditional statement. And what we want to know is, if the distance traveled is less than 1,000, then we're going to do something. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a less than operator. We're going to put that 1,000 right in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check that distance traveled variable. So we're going to pop this in over here. And then what we're going to do is, if these are both true, what we're going to do is we're going to go to that spaceship. And once we go to the spaceship, what we're going to do is we're going to show up. So we do that there. And that's the final block of code that we have for this project. So essentially, we've got 4 different ones. We've got the spaceship, we've got the planet Mars, we've got our lander, and we've got an explosion. So let's click on the green flag and let's see how this works. So we activate this. And what we see is we go up in the air, we're holding it steady by pressing the space bar. You can see that the Mars lander, the Mars planet is increasing in size as we stay. We're also seeing in the upper left-hand corner that we're tracking our acceleration variable and our distance travel variable. We can also use our arrow keys, the left and right arrow keys, to sort of navigate around. But essentially what we have to do is we have to keep this spaceship away from the sides for until our distance traveled is equal to 1,000. And then once our distance traveled has equaled 1,000, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to land this spaceship on the planet Mars. So really cool project. We got a chance to use boundary conditions. We got to broadcast messages in terms of landed and explosion. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, we'd love a like, we'd love a comment, we'd love a subscribe. But we hope you enjoyed this one and looking forward to seeing you back.